with that, Brad Dworkin is our next speaker in opposition to the proposition. Brad is a student at Ryerson College down the block. He's a precocious student, I have to say, having looked at a lot of his work, including the installation outside the doors here that you can take a look at in the break. So he's done some wonderful, thoughtful, complex multimedia efforts and will speak against the proposition.
Okay, thank you. So unlike many of the people on the panel today, I don't have the same volume of experience perhaps to draw upon because I am a student, but I'll just begin sort of by discussing some of the things that you discussed. So for example, my second life and the feeling that, well, that anyone could go into this world and there's this collaboration where people can get together and make these things. I know of a number of other video game-based cinematic experiences. Red versus Blue is one that's quite popular, which is based on the Halo game engine. And ultimately, what I'm going to bring up a little bit later on in my discussion is the idea that within the world of the digital universe, the internet and games and things of this nature, we have to redefine authorship and auteur as it pertains to documentary. So in this case, who would be the auteur of that? Well, I'm going to suppose that the auteur would in fact be the people who created the engine for this, this game would have their hand on it because they developed the programming, the aesthetics, and to an extent set the parameters, much like the director of a documentary would. So to go into my points, first thing I mentioned was, of course, that we have to redefine auteur theory. And I mean, everyone goes based on Bazin, Serres, what they said back in the 60s and 50s about auteur theory. And I'm going to quote Andrew Serres here. He said that auteur theory itself is a pattern theory in constant flux. And therefore, we have to continually find our new definition of it. And as we move into the digital age, we cannot use the same definition of auteur theory to explain ourselves. So I have an example here, and it's up, very nice. Mob Films, this is a student from Queen's University, Eamon Crudden, his PhD thesis. And what he's doing is collecting footage of protests from all over the world and assembling it here in what he calls an unedited form. And his goal in his thesis, he says, is he wants to efface the effacing of the auteur for the sake of collectivization. So he would be arguing for collaborative authorship. Now, my argument is that while the people submitting are quote-unquote unedited, we have to look at the entire work, not as the film or the television distribution that we would think of in traditional documentary, but in digital documentary, it's the entire work. So the entire website, which contains the work, what Wagner would call the Gesamtkunstwerk, and please excuse my pronunciation on that. We have to understand that by choosing a color scheme for the website and an aesthetic for that, the video codecs, resolution, accompanying layout and text, the technique for comments, he informs the footage much like a director would take a piece of stock footage or archival footage and edit that. If we can go on to the next slide. This is BlogTO. It's a popular blogging site. And again, it's all set up I'm looking at a textual sense now. There are limitations. There is a context determined by perceived authors referred to as moderators. The other slide I have is a Facebook group for auteurs, apparently. The terms and the circumstances under which you can develop and share information, it still has a moderator, a person in charge, an auteur of these works. So in the digital world, can we say that the auteur is dead? I don't think so. I think they've just taken a new form, and we need to move beyond purely the film or video inset experience and look at the entire piece, the website itself. I want to talk just finally about the piece that's outside in the hallway. You can take a look at it at the break. Can we go to the last one? Thank you. The piece is called SSDE, and that's my own experiment with collaborative authorship to see if you could find our way to it, if I could find a way to remove the filmmaker from the experience of making a documentary. So it's 20 different feeds of footage of the city, all taken at the same time. And what I realized as I was putting it together and trying to not edit it was that the piece itself began to take a form by what I laid out in terms of how it had to be. People had to go and film at a specific time. It had to be in Toronto. The way that it's projected or set up on an HD screen or if I put it on a projector, the ways in which I altered the footage, I could not remove myself from the filmmaking process. So ultimately, I think that in the way that traditional documentaries are bound by editing, an assertion of the authorial voice, digital documentaries must also be bound by the context of their exhibition and distribution, and I think that's equally subject to the hand of the author. Thank you.
Thank you. It's okay. Thank you very much, Brad. Thoughtful. So again, be thinking about how you're going to vote with your hands.
Brad, I actually accidentally clapped for you at the end of it, and I realized, oh my God, I'm the adjudicator. Maybe I shouldn't have clapped. And I really liked it because you actually redefined the locus of authorship, that perhaps just because it's not located in the same place doesn't mean it's not there, and that perhaps in the new media, the concept, like in video games and in Facebook and YouTube, that really the authorship is somewhere else. And just because we can't find it or don't know where it is or we haven't been trained to look at it doesn't mean that it's not there. I thought that was a genuinely new insight. And at the Knowledge Network, I really want to look at the internet, and I'd love to pick your brain about that, and, you know, looking for new people. So great. I think you're... So I like that. Adnan. Adnan, you too, you set aside the